Today's discussion is about working with a team. You can definitely stick around after the discussion, and we will be kind of doing some Q&A and networking afterwards. If during the discussion you have any questions, feel free to reach out on Twitch, and we will be monitoring that. And without further ado, I will pass it along.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Just going to share my slides here, the questions that we have, and then like Emily said, if the viewers want to add questions to the list, feel free, or even if you have an answer and you want to give us your take on how you would answer this question, feel free to do that in the Twitch chat or in our Slack channel for Code Newbies or the UG freeCodeCamp, okay? We'll be watching those for questions and answers. So working with the team, this was a topic that came up a couple of months ago, I think. This is something I think is a little bit difficult for junior developers who have been learning on their own. And then when they go maybe to their first job working with the development team, that is going to be an adjustment period. They're not totally sure what to expect. So we heard that topic that people were interested in. And then another topic was neurodivergence. And we'll get into that later in the questions. But we thought we'd combine these two ideas into one panel for today. So I'm going to mention each of our three panelists and then just let them introduce themselves. The first one is Dale.
Hi, so my name is Dale Spoonemoore. I'm a software developer for my consulting group. I also have a side project called From Seed to Spoon. It's a gardening app that makes growing food easy. I'm also on the board of Autism Oklahoma and teach a coding class through Autism Oklahoma for people that are on the spectrum. And we're working on building an app right now together as a group, and it's been a fun process. So happy to be here today and hopefully to help however I can. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Dale. Next up is Diana.
Can y'all hear me? Okay. Hi, I'm Diana Varnes. I run programming for the OU Innovation Hub, also currently the Vice President of Techlahoma Foundation. I've been working with teams for several years now, both remote and in person, so thought I'd jump in and share some knowledge.
All right, thank you. We're looking forward to hearing that knowledge. And our third panelist is Tatia.
Hey, my name is Tatia Wallin. I currently work with small business owners to get their first websites up. I mostly focus on speed and accessibility. Those are two things that I became really passionate about in my last job whenever I was working with someone who was also passionate about that. So I inherited that. So I'm definitely excited to be here and share some of that information.
Awesome. I do want to mention that we did have a fourth panelist, Keith Lewis, was really looking forward to joining us and unfortunately has a migraine today. So I think a lot of people know how that feels. We appreciate him volunteering even though he couldn't make it today. So I'll just jump right in with this first question and feel free to raise your hand or just jump in with your answer. What are the hardest parts of working with a team? And that could apply to remote or in person or both. Anybody want to take a stab at our first answer? Like what do you, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go. For me, remote, the hardest, actually, either way, the hardest part is communication. Remote is kind of obvious. If you're not in person, it can be a little bit more difficult to communicate with each other a little bit more often, to keep on the same page. In person, it tends to be more of either conflicting personalities or if you don't know the best way to communicate with someone and if they tend to take offense to something, if there's things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Tasha?
I definitely agree with Diana about communication. Another one that seems to be a pickle for people is organization. If there's great organization, then you usually don't have as many questions. But when there isn't great organization, then you can pretty much be scattered to the winds as far as who's doing what, and it just gets really messy.
Yeah, great points. Dale?
So I think back to when I was just kind of trying to get started as a developer, and I think the hardest part I had was feeling like I wasn't asking like too many questions. You know, like I didn't want to feel like I was bugging the senior developer too much. So trying to find that balance of when should I be asking for help versus when should I be spending all day trying to figure this out? Like that was really hard in the beginning, for sure.
I recommend on YouTube, go look under Techlahoma's channel. John Mosesman has a talk where he talked about becoming a great junior developer, and he had some really good tips on a try timer and sort of a Mad Libs approach to asking great questions. So those are all great points. Our next question is, and I think Dale started to answer this. If you want to add to it, feel free. What do you wish you had known about working with teams when you first started?
Yeah, so I mean, related to what I was talking about before, I wish I would have understood better that I wasn't going to be judged for asking a question. The problem is when you ask the same question, 3 or 4 times. That's when it becomes a problem. But asking a question and coming with data that supports why you're asking the question and coming with multiple angles that you're, of reasons that you have the question, I think all of that helps. So that's definitely something that I wish I would have known when I first started working. I also wish I would have read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People way earlier in my career, because that really helped me understand people a lot better as well, as far as how to present things to other people in a way that they'll better interact with those ideas, if you will, in a non-confrontational way. So
yeah, that's excellent. Diana?
Yeah, I was going to kind of piggyback off that a little bit. I had wished I had known that it's okay to speak up when you don't know or don't understand something. Yes, they expect you to go and try to find the answer, but sometimes I feel like I was so petrified of being judged for not knowing something that I would keep waiting and waiting and waiting to the point that it might ruin a relationship that I had, just because I was too self-conscious to speak up.
Yeah, great answers. So this, gets into difficult situations, but how do you deal with difficult teammates?
That's something I do a lot. I try to get to know them, talk to them, try to figure out what's behind why they're being difficult. Most of the time I've come to realize that if people are being difficult, there's usually a reason behind it. Either they've got some type of personal frustration. Like I've got one person I've been working with over the past couple of years who's super young, and he was irritated that he was more highly educated than I was. Never mind that I'm twice his age and had a lot more life experience. And once I understood that that's what he was thinking, then I was able to tailor the way that I communicated with him better.
Great. Tasha?
This actually has come up a few times in different positions I've held. And one of the things I would recommend, especially if there's someone that makes things personal, is keep it professional. Don't engage with things whenever they take cheap shots or something about you as a person. But also, as Diana said, try to get to know them. And I had one person that was pretty much just against having anything to do with me and trying to figure out ways that we could work together. So what I wound up having to do is discuss with my other peers and even my manager of what was going on. For sure, we really weren't, we were pretty much told that anytime that we interacted alone, that we would have to record everything just in case something happened so our managers could review it. And this person actually wound up taking a lot of shots at just pretty much everybody on the team later along the line. So it's one of those things, as long as if you do everything that you can to try to bridges, but also let others know that, this is going on, then usually that's the best route that I've found.
Dale, did you have something you wanted to add?
I've been really lucky. I've worked on a bunch of great teams, and I haven't really had a lot of issues with people. I think that it really just comes down to trying to have a genuine interest in people and building relationships, so that when things do get difficult with code or whatever's going on, you have those friendships that keep it from getting sour. So I've just been really blessed to be on good teams.
Awesome. And that was a great answer too. So a slightly different question. What about managers? When you have a difficult manager, what do you do? Yeah, go ahead, Dale.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, like, my honest answer is that might be time to find a different job, because it's hard to get around that without it being weird. So sometimes maybe that's your sign that it's time to look somewhere else. I mean, there's so many jobs out there. There's so many fish in the sea, if you will. So that's my honest answer. There's probably a better answer other than just leaving. But that'd be probably what I would do.
Yeah, Diana, what do you think?
I was going to say the exact same thing. Life is too short to deal with difficult people who, sorry, I got distracted. The thing popped up, said it was going to lower my hand, and I was like, what? But anyways, no, life is too short to deal with difficult people, especially if they're above you. There's generally not a lot that I have found that you can do with someone who's on kind of a power trip. So I would definitely recommend, if not having a discussion with them and trying to talk to them about it, you may not want to bring up the fact that they're difficult, but try to create some type of rapport with them. Let them know that you're human, that find some common ground between the two of you. And if that kind of stuff doesn't work, I would absolutely look for something else, because there are a lot of great managers out there.
Yeah, Tasha?
So one of the things that I came across one time is that my vice president's reputation preceded him. He's really nervous about having anything to do with this guy. But whenever it came down to it, I actually got along with him really well. So I would caution people that if they don't even know who they're dealing with at first, don't let their reputation shade anything, because you may wind up working well with them. But in the event that things really are pretty toxic, then I do absolutely agree with Dale and Diana that it's time to look for another position. And in the meantime, I remember reading a book, I think it was by Robert Sutton, that was saying that you kind of treat it like whitewater rafting. You keep your feet up and you kick off the rocks, so to speak, is, try to just survive as best you can until you find a new position.
Yeah, that's great advice. We got a question on Twitch. Which software is good to manage a team? So if you have done any team management, what kind of software have you used for that?
I mean, I think Azure DevOps is going to be the de facto that most teams are going to use. I mean, at least all the teams I've used have been on have used that. I think also that's managing the code aspect of a team. But there's also managing the social connections of the team. Microsoft Teams has really taken over as far as I've seen as well on that front. So maybe someone else can throw out some other solutions you all have used.
Diana, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we tend to use Microsoft. We tried using Slack. Slack and Google Docs didn't seem to work as well as we had hoped. So we ended up switching over to SharePoint and Microsoft Teams and use that for sharing work and being able to communicate and things like that.
I went ahead and switched because I felt like this question was related as far as communication preferences. And then we're talking about Slack and Teams. And do y'all have any tips on working with other people's communication preferences? We talk about how important communication is, but then like over communication or communicating at different times of day. I'll let Diana go.
Yeah, I usually end up asking anytime I start working with somebody, I ask them, what are your preferred communication methods? And instead of being the one who is stubborn and trying to make everybody fit into my best communication method, I try to be flexible. So I am one of those people that my phone is with notifications. I usually keep it on vibrate to keep it as least annoying as possible, and also let people know that I'm not necessarily going to respond immediately, but I do try to have several different ways that I'm available to them for them to communicate with me that's easiest for them.
Yeah. Dale, do you have something to add?
I was just going to say one thing that I found has been helpful to kind of cross communication lines is there's pretty much no one that hasn't responded well to a heavy use of screenshots and screen recordings when communicating. So typically the way I'll communicate with someone is I'll send a Teams message saying, hey, I'm seeing this. Here's some screenshots. Here's some screen recordings. I'll send like the code. Like I send a lot of information. I think that always helps out. Now it can be overwhelming too. So you got to find that balance. You don't want to send too much, because I've done that in my career too at points where I've sent a flood of information and then it overwhelms them. So you've got to be pointed in how you do it. But I try to avoid phone calls if at all possible. I think most people prefer it that way.
Yeah, great answers. Slightly related, what about schedule preferences? We kind of talked about, getting these messages all day and how to, deal with the ones that don't work well with your schedule. Diana?
Yeah, this is something I've been trying to work with recently because I've been one of those that would respond at all hours of the day. And I've been trying really hard to create boundaries so that I have time to relax in the evenings. Sometimes I'll go ahead and make an exception and let people know that I don't respond after 6 o'clock. But if you really need to do after 6 o'clock, then let me know and we'll schedule something after that time. And maybe once a week, I'll have an hour set aside from say 8 to 9 p.m. that'll go ahead and respond with them. And then I also let people know I'm generally not good and I'm not a morning person. So before 10 a.m. isn't necessarily the best, but if that's the only time that'll work for you, let me know and we'll schedule it.
Yeah, that's a great plan. Tasha?
So I agree a lot with what Diana's saying. And I would agree with her that boundaries are incredibly important, especially whenever you're first starting out at a new job, because you don't want to be so accommodating that you stretch yourself thin and sacrifice your own performance at that. So you really have to know your limits and you have to be able to communicate those to your team. So if somebody says, hey, I've got a meeting that I'd like to talk to you about servers at 3 a.m., then you go, yeah, that would be great, but I would be asleep by then. So can we set it for, 9 a.m. or something like that? It's completely reasonable to, set those boundaries. And so the sooner you do that, the easier it's going to be, because if you wind up trying to establish boundaries after the fact, then people are going to get upset because that's a new rule that they didn't have before.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I like the suggestion to have an alternative. Okay, that doesn't work for me, but this would instead. So great answer. What are some common themes, and maybe that's something we've already mentioned, or new ideas you'll have on when teams struggle or fail? What are the common themes that you see? Dale?
For me, it's lack of communication. That's something that we struggle with quite a bit at my current place. We're scattered all throughout the state, and we just have one team meeting on Monday mornings where we're supposed to share everything, but most of the time, half the team feels like it's a waste of time. So they tune out and they're working while that's happening. And I have found that trying to meet in person rather than on Zoom helps us out quite a bit. We may not get to do it as often, but I try to make sure that happens at least once or twice a semester so that we can get on the same page and talk to each other more and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. Dale, do you have something to add?
I think whenever you allow things to get so busy that you stop doing some of the core things that help you be successful, like unit tests and proper planning and all that kind of stuff. I think that's really outside pressures whenever you allow them to squeeze you so much that you stop doing the things that ensure that you don't have issues.
Yeah, Tasha?
I'm going to go back to organization, which kind of meshes what Diana said about poor communication and then what Dale said about, gosh, my mind just blank. Whatever he just said, I agree with. I've also seen some internal competition and power struggles happen, and things just dissolve really quick when that starts to happen.
Yeah, great points. Chris said he works on a remote team with members across all U.S. time zones, and they found the best way to work with schedules is to schedule things as little as possible, as few things as possible. So I thought that was a great point that he added. I'm going to skip. I think we were here in the list. So introverts and extroverts. I find this to be a classic struggle, and I hope you'll have some advice for introverts who are working with extroverts. Tasha?
Okay, so I'm going to give this a little bit of background. Whenever I was in college, I did one of those evaluations, and my counselor at the time, whenever he reviewed mine, he looked at my score and he said, "You are by far the most introverted person I've ever met based on this." So with that in mind, I do want to kind of make the distinction between introversion and social anxiety, because the two of them are sometimes confused, and there's kind of a misnomer that introverts just don't like hanging out with people or that they have difficulty with it, and that's not actually true. Introverts just don't get their energy from that, so they need time to be able to recover and do their own thing. So when working with extroverts, introverts should probably make it clear that, hey, you know, I have this time that I can do this meeting or talk to you about this or hang out or whatever, but then I'm going to need this at a time to either do some work on my own in a quiet place or something to that degree to be able to recover and work with you later in the future. That's always been my approach.
Yeah, I like that. Dale, do you have something?
I think the biggest tip I can give is try and find a job where you can work remote, because my life completely changed whenever I stopped forcing myself to be in an office for 40, 50 hours a week, surrounded by cubicles and noise bouncing off everywhere and lights flickering and everything else that triggered all the issues that I have. So, that's the biggest tip I can have, I can give is do that, because I like working on a team. I like being able to communicate with people over Teams and the virtual calls, and then we have happy hours every month or so, and I like that, but that's about as much as I need. So if you're massively introverted like I am, then that's my biggest tip.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. The next question is the opposite. Maybe everyone on the call is an introvert, but what tips would you give to extroverts and how to deal with us?
Give us our space. Yeah, I try to explain to people that I have a set amount of energy each day, and some of it's related to health issues. And I had come across what's called the spoon theory, where you have X amount of energy per day, and having to get up in the morning and get ready for work and drive into work might take 2 or 3 spoons, and you have 8 per day. So that's a good chunk of your energy that's already taken. And then having to communicate and talk to people is going to take some extra spoons. And so all of these things that you have to do is going to completely wipe you out. Whereas they gather spoons by interacting and doing these things, and just trying to use that as a comparison to help them try to understand a little bit better. And I've had a lot of luck with that.
Yeah, Tasha?
So I would say check in if you're not sure, because oftentimes whenever you see an introvert, and there's usually some kind of cue that they'll give if you know them well enough and you start working with them regularly. For me, I get really quiet and I'm barely paying attention, and I may or may not be, but it's just because I'm so drained that I just can't stay with it anymore. So if it's that point, then just check in and say, hey, do you need a break or something? And then don't take it personally if they say yes, because it's not about you. It's just how those types of people work.
Yeah, before you said that, someone on Twitch said that they tell the super extroverts not to take it personally, that I need some alone time. It's not you, it's me. Dale, what did you want to add?
Yeah, kind of related to that is don't take it personal if you don't get a response to a message. Like a lot of people that are highly introverted like I am, like I've had to learn to completely not look at messages for hours at a time. So I don't, a lot of extroverted people live connected to their phone. They like the notifications. The notifications make them happy. Notifications stress me out. Like if I get a notification, I have a text message, it stresses me out. So like you just got to understand that we're wired differently, and the communication schedules might be a little bit different. And don't don't think it's anything personal or that you're being ignored. It's just how it is.
Yeah, great points. So I mentioned at the beginning that part of the topic of this conversation sort of stemmed from, I think it was actually Keith talking about, the specific challenges that people with neurodivergence face. And so I was hoping that one of y'all who know more about this than I do, which is very little, so that's one of the reasons why we're here, is to learn about this. Could you explain what neurodivergence is? Tasha?
Neurodivergence is basically clinical in terms that the way a person thinks or behaves is actually not due to any sort of psychological condition, but rather because of how their brain is set up and how their wires are arranged in their brain. So for a person with autism, they may behave very specifically versus a person with ADHD or Tourette's or OCD or anything like that. It's not necessarily just a psychological or anything like that disorder. It's specifically to how the brain is built.
Yeah, great answer. Diana or Dale, do you want to add to that? Go ahead, Diana.
I was going to second what she said. She
Great answer.
hit on the nail.
Perfect.
Or nail on the head.
Right. Either way, that's great. So those of you who are neurodivergent, what are some of the issues and struggles that you deal with?
So my brain, my wife has told me my brain works quite a bit different than hers. Like whenever I'm trying to think of something, I pull up a mental image of something that I have, whether it's code or whatever. Like I pull up that memory and look at it, and that doesn't work sometimes. That process. If I'm in an interview in a stressful environment and they're hammering next door to me, which was a real life situation that happened to me once, like that hammer throws me off. Like I can't, like that process doesn't work. So I think that is one of the biggest things I struggle with is getting people to understand that sometimes the thing that I can usually do doesn't work. And if I'm overwhelmed or if there's a light that's flickering or if there's lights that are different colors in the room that I'm in, or all these different things that can make it where my brain doesn't do what I need it to do, that's just something I can't necessarily control. And the older I've gotten, the better I've gotten at being able to control that. But a lot of that kind of stems back to what I've talked to you about working from home, controlling my environment, making sure that I'm in the same type of environment every day so that I eliminate those things that make my brain not work sometimes.
That's a great explanation. Diana?
I was going to say I get overwhelmed extremely easily. And you can kind of tell how stressed out I am or how overwhelmed I am because, as Tasha, I have Tourette's. So you can, and it's all in my face. But I have learned that I have to plan things out at the beginning of the week, see everything that's happening, figure out a plan for everything. And then I let people know that I do get overwhelmed really easily, especially if I'm having a conversation with somebody. If I get super quiet, it's usually because you say one word to me and I feel like fireworks go off in my brain trying to connect all the things I've ever known in my entire life to what you just said. And I need time to process and sort through all of that so that I can relate back to what you're talking about. So if I get super quiet or something like that, or if you see that my Tourette's is getting super bad, then let me have some time to breathe and calm down and process things a little bit.
Oh, that's very interesting. Tasha?
So one of the big things for me is I was just recently re-diagnosed because when I was 6, I was diagnosed with Tourette's, OCD, and ADHD, and then when I was 27, I was actually reevaluated, and the Tourette's and OCD dropped off and has been replaced with level 1 autism, and I'm very high functioning. And so what usually happens with me is there's nothing outwardly indicative of the fact that I'm on the spectrum. So what usually happens is whenever, as they say, the mask slips and suddenly I wind up making someone angry and I'm not entirely sure what the problem is. And so there have been some very interesting conversations with people over, oh, well, you said this. I thought you literally meant that. And the other one I would say is that on occasion, I would say for probably a few seconds at a time, I become aphasic, which is basically where my brain forgets English. It's the only language I know. And I'm just like, you're saying words and I just have no idea what they are at this very moment. So I usually just try to struggle through and be like, I'm sorry, what? And then like speak into my good ear. And usually by the second or third time, I ask them to slow down. And then my brain's like, oh yeah, I remember what these words are. So yeah, those are the two big ones for me.
This is super interesting to me, very enlightening. I didn't know a lot of these things. Diana?
Oh, I was going to say the same thing. I didn't realize there was a term for it, but same thing. I have a hard time sometimes because my brain is too busy trying to process all those things that you say something to me, and I can't process what you're saying. And so this is something my husband and I bicker about quite a bit because he's like, you never listen to me. And I'm like, I am, but I honestly can't process what you're saying. Give me a moment. And then I try to let things calm down a little bit and then ask him again. I was like, okay, please, I am trying to listen to you. I do want to hear what you say. Now I'm in a place that I can understand what it is.
Emily said, sometimes I say I'm on dial-up or AOL. I thought that was funny. We'll let Tasha go next, and then Dale, I think you had something too.
Yeah, okay, so pro tip, especially if like somebody asks you to repeat something a couple of times, what I've actually wound up doing with my husband is, oh, the phone's on the counter or something like that. And it's like, he'll say what a couple of times, and then I'll actually switch things around. So like the counter, the phone's on it. And for whatever reason, that seems to really just help with the clicking of what it is you're trying to get across to them. I don't know why that is, but really consider maybe that there's a way that you can communicate differently if they're just not getting it.
Yeah, it's great. Dale, did you have something too?
No, but I can totally relate to everything y'all are saying.
Yeah.
Right there with y'all.
Well, what about at work? Are you openly neurodivergent at work? And how has your team accommodated your needs? Yeah.
So I found out that I was autistic when I was really early in my career. I was about 19 years old. So it's just kind of always been with me. I've never been shy about it. I think it's pretty obvious once you're around me for a while. And also in our field, like it's pretty typical. I mean, it's something you see a lot. I think the bigger issue I had was when I worked outside of the tech industry when I was younger. And it was a way different world back then. And it would have been way different for me now, trying to do things like wait tables or work at Blockbuster Video. So I'm definitely glad the world has changed and it's become better, hopefully, for people that are on the spectrum in those situations.
Yeah, that's great. Diana?
Yeah, I'm probably the odd one out that I'm not autistic, but I do feel like there's probably some undiagnosed ADHD, different things like that. But I am very open about the struggles that I have and my wide variety of health issues. When I started working at this job, I was actually almost to the point of trying to scare them off with all of the things. And the more that I shared, the more understanding that it seemed like they were. And they're like, that's fine, that's okay. And so I have found that being completely open and honest and oversharing has worked extremely well for me, because that's how I have found the people that I work really well with and the people that I later on down the road would not work well with.
Yeah, that's great. Tasha?
So I'm actually going to be the one to say that I use caution whenever I disclose. And that's largely because I'm so high functioning that oftentimes that winds up actually being a hindrance to me. I've had people, after I've disclosed that I'm on the spectrum, treat me in a way that they expect me to be far less intelligent than what they assumed beforehand. And I've also had people on my team and even in management decide for me that I'm not capable of doing certain things that would have otherwise fallen to me to do. So, and that's part of it is that's a form of ableism, to where sometimes people will make assumptions about what you can or cannot do without talking to you about it or even getting your input. So if you can, the term here is passing. If you can pass as someone who isn't neurodivergent, which is typically termed neurotypical, you may want to use caution and only disclose to your manager or someone close to you in your workplace if you're actually struggling. If you can do all right with not disclosing, it might actually be to your benefit to not do it, because I suspect I've also been barred from being promoted because of my disability.
That's interesting. Some good points there. Definitely interesting things I hadn't considered at all. So our next question I might rephrase a little bit. It's about managing a team that consists of people who are neurodivergent. But just what tips would y'all have for the people who are working with someone who's neurodivergent? How can they accommodate that person better, specifically as a manager or as a coworker? Dale?
So I think a lot of it comes back to really understanding some of the tips I talked about earlier for dealing with introverted people. So if you set them on a task, give them some space to work on that task. Don't ask them a question about a different part of the project 6 hours after they've started looking at that new thing. Like, give them room to engross themselves in the thing they're looking at, and really understand that if you do send that message of, hey, can you look at this other piece of the project with me for 15 minutes? Understand that you are robbing them of 2 or 3 hours at least, and so I think really understanding what, that piece of it is the biggest tip I can give if you're managing a team of people that are like that.
Yeah, Diana?
And I was going to say, I try to communicate to people. Well, first, I don't assume anything of anyone. I ask, what is your capacity? Can you handle this? Are you comfortable with this? Is this too much for you, given everything that you're dealing with? And at the same time, I tell people, I was like, don't assume anything of me. Please ask me what my capacity is. So with the issues that Tatia has dealt with, that's how I have found a good way of dealing with it, is letting them know, hey, please don't make assumptions about me. Ask me directly. I'm open to communication. That seems to work best for me.
Yeah, great points. Tatia?
Okay, so I would say be very clear about what you want. So if there are a lot of moving parts, make sure that you're clear as to what it is they're supposed to do, because a lot of the time, for me, there seems to be, whenever people in general use language, there's a subtext that I don't get. And so I may wind up doing something very different than what was expected of me. And so I've heard the phrase, well, that's not exactly what I had in mind, but this works, or something to that effect. And then especially whenever it comes to that conversation for accommodation, I would say be careful whenever you ask people what they need. Because sometimes whenever I've come across that, I tell people what I've needed, and then they say, well, we can't do that because there's this reason. What else do you think we could do? And so that puts a lot of burden on the person who's asking for accommodation to come up with a solution. And the question really winds up being, what can be done that takes little or no effort on our part that will make you happy? And that's a very difficult question for those of us who are already at a disadvantage to figure out, because we're already coming to you for help. And not only are we not getting it, but then we're actually trying to find a solution whenever we don't really understand what we're dealing with either.
Yeah, some really good answers there. There's a question on Twitch. How do you decide what your capacities are? Sometimes it's hard to measure or even communicate, in words. So, Dale, what do you have?
That's what I'm really bad at. I like to say yes to everything. I think having a manager that understands that about you and protects you from it is crucial, and one that doesn't take advantage of it and use it to burn you out. I think that's been something that I've been really blessed throughout my career, that I've had managers that know that about me and know that if they ask me to do something, I'm probably gonna say yes. So probably not to do that too much. But I think you also have to be better. I got to be better about not doing that too. So it's just something that you just have to learn how to work on.
Yeah, Diana?
Yeah, I was going to say, everybody knows I am horrible about saying yes to all the things. And something that I have been working on, I started seeing a therapist and figuring out what my signs are that I'm doing too much and when do I need to step back, and realizing that I do say yes, because especially when I start feeling guilty because I've dropped so many balls from trying to do too much. And then I also have people that I've talked to, such as Emily, who I've told them, keep an eye out. I just had some really close coworkers and friends that I said, keep an eye on me and let me know when I'm doing too much, and tell me no if I try to take on too much. So I try not to do all the burden on myself, although I do work on that a lot. But I also have some people that I trust very closely that I have to help me out with that.
That's great. Tatia?
To build on Diana's response just now, Brene Brown actually said in one of her books that one of the best things you can do is have a short list of people. And she says that you're usually only going to have one or two, but these are people that you would essentially trust with your life, that know you very well and will be honest with you. And those are the people that are the most valuable, because they can give you a perspective about who you are that you may not even be aware of, that's how you come across to other people. And so that can actually be very useful whenever it comes to modifying your own choices, habits, and behaviors.
Yeah, that's great advice. There's a question on Twitch. How do you deal with abilities it moved as I was trying to read it. Changes in your abilities or your capacities, your ability due to working conditions, workloads, pandemics. Like, how do you deal with those changes? Diana?
Communication. I let people know if I say something, because I might say yes to something and know that I had the capacity at the time that I did that, but something has come up, or I have drained myself way too much. I just let people know, hey, I know that I had the capacity when I said yes to this originally. My situation has changed some, and tell them what to expect out of me, and be like, hey, I don't think I can meet this deadline. Is there someone else that I can help, or that can help me with this? Or is this a deadline that I can postpone a little bit? Things like that. But just being honest with them about it has worked.
Yeah, and I think we're actually getting into and possibly already answering this question. What are some tools and tricks you've learned to better manage your work? And that could be in terms of neurodivergence or just in general. But definitely communication is one. Diana, did you have more on that one?
I was going to say, I wish I had my laptop bag here. I have a notebook that I picked up at Target that has several different like notes and a calendar, two different types of calendars, a weekly one and a monthly one. Place for notes, a place for phone calls or tasks, things like that. And I use that to brainstorm all the things that I need to do each week. And then I put all of those tasks into my calendar and try to figure out when am I going to have time to do all of those things. And then at the beginning of the week, try to communicate that stuff out to my team. And as they approach me with things, then with each thing that comes up, I try to reassess where can that fit in, or if it can't, is there something I can let go that can be postponed, or is that something that I need them to either try to do themselves and I'll give them guidance and mentor them over it, or try to find somebody else.
Yeah, that's great. Dale, what did you want to add?
So one thing that I'm pretty religious about is using tasks inside of Azure DevOps. So if I'm working on a user story, I go through and create cards for every single task. Even if it's something I've done a million times, I know what it's going to be. It just helps keep me focused on what I'm doing, and it keeps me from wandering off and building the wrong thing. Because too many times I've gone off building something and then I build the wrong thing because I just take one little path wrong. And on a related note, I think really learning to understand how my brain works, and that I'm better off if I take breaks. So knocking out 3 or 4 of those tasks and then going and spending, 20 or 30 minutes outside, getting some fresh air, doing something like that on the farm, and then coming back and then knocking out another 3 or 4 tasks. And, like the Pomodoro method is something that you can look into if you're interested in that. But just really understanding that if you burn yourself out and can plow through an entire day, you're not going to be as productive as if you cycle and allow yourself to have breaks and let your brain take a rest.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro technique. Tasha?
So I'm kind of like Diana, that I use a calendar, but mine's purely digital. So I have Apple everything because I'm one of those people. But pretty much everything goes on my calendar, and there are occasions when something crosses my mind and I'm in a completely different place to where I can't address it right then and there. So I wind up putting it on the calendar on my phone. It syncs up with my computer, and then I set it for a time that I can actually do it when I know I'll be at my computer, and then it gets done. That's pretty much how I have to manage my life with ADHD. I also want to point out that for especially people with ADHD who have a creative flair, there's a thing called a bullet journal, which is also often referred to as a bujo. And that works really well for a certain kind of person. So that's something else you might explore if you're struggling with keeping things balanced and figured out.
Yeah, that's great. Diana?
I was also going to say, make sure you schedule in time to rest. You need to, overworking yourself will cause you health issues in the long run, and it's going to make things worse. So make sure that every week and every day you're scheduling in time for yourself to rest and relax.
Yeah, that's really important, the breaks and the resting. Well, I told y'all we definitely would not make it to the last question, and we actually have. So this is the last one. If someone on Twitch says using Trello, yeah, for personal management in the same way that Dale talked about work tasks, where you can have a card for each thing. So yeah, feel free to answer this question, and then also any other things that you wanted to talk about. Looking to the panelists and also our viewers on Twitch. Feel free to add your comments and other questions you want to ask. But some tools and tricks for relationships, whether that's with your manager or coworkers or anyone. What tips do y'all have on that? Dale?
Again, I'm going to point back to How to Win Friends and Influence People. A couple of key points that I try and always remember out of that book are to give honest and sincere appreciation whenever you see it. If you're just not ready, they did a great job on something that you appreciated, how they coded something or whatever it is, don't BS them. Like, make sure it's an honest something that you saw. Another thing that I've tried to make sure I do is if I'm going to give criticism or any type of negative feedback, I try and find some sort of example of where I've done that in the past and bring that up first. That's usually pretty helpful. But really just check out that book because it taught me a lot about how to handle people and how to really just phrase things differently to get the point across that you're trying to actually make.
Yeah, Diana?
Yeah, I'm going to say read that book. I read the same thing, and it completely changed everything. I will oftentimes make it weird sharing my appreciation for people and complimenting and things like that. I just feel like we don't do that enough in this society. And I'll tell people I love them, and I know that it'll be dead silence back, but I really mean it. I really do love everybody. And then definitely anytime I have to do criticism, I let them know, hey, you're not alone. This happens to all of us. This is when I did this, or when I did the same thing, this is what I learned from it. This is what I do now to fix it. And then ask them if they have anything that they would like to, any input that they would like to give on that.
Yeah, that's great. Tasha?
Okay, so I have also read How to Win Friends and Influence People and recommend it. As far as what Dale was talking about in terms of criticism and negative feedback, I would be very careful with how you phrase things. Telling someone they talk too much is very different from, oh, well, when we're in meetings, you kind of start talking about things like whenever you were a kid or something, and that's not terribly useful for when we're at meetings. Could you maybe consider not doing that so much? Because what you want here is something specific that's not about them as who they are as a person, but rather just their behavior that they can then change.
Yeah, definitely some excellent advice there. Diana, did you have more?
Yeah, I was going to say, what was it? There's a movie, Raising Helen, and one of the quotes in there that I've always remembered is there's no bad people, just bad behaviors. And so I try to focus on those behaviors and, again, bring up a situation where I am horrible about oversharing, and sometimes it's not appropriate. And I don't even know. I lost my train of thought, but yeah.
Oh, that was great. So like I said, we're on our last question. Are there any other questions that y'all on Twitch who are watching want to ask in the chat, or even the panelists? Is there something else y'all wanted to talk about that we didn't get to? Not totally fine. Our plan at this point is to, after we say goodbye to the stream, invite everyone who's watching to come on this call with us, and feel free to hang around as long as you want to on this Google Meet call. We'll share the link in the Twitch chat and in Slack here in a second. But you can just come on and chat with us, do some networking, ask some more in-depth questions maybe, and share some more advice with each other. And then I'm going to post a link to the Slack one more time just so that everyone has that. There was another book recommendation, so feel free to post that in our book club channel or the Code Newbies channel, advice you'll have on that. But you can find our next meetups on meetup.com, and we'll be doing the Advent of Code on Thursdays in December, and then our next monthly meetup will be December 12th. So I think that's the next time we'll see y'all. I want to say thank you to Alex for running the stream today, Chris for being on to help also, but definitely to our three panelists, Diana, Dale, Tasha. I really appreciate y'all coming on and answering these questions that maybe not always super easy to discuss. I'm really glad that y'all shared some excellent advice with us and definitely helped us learn some things here. And then also want to say thank you to Keith for bringing up this topic in the first place. And I'm sure that he had,
and thanks to Kimberly too.
It's like, okay, that'd be weird for me to read that on Twitch. But yeah, definitely find all these folks in Slack, on LinkedIn, and follow up with them. And with that, I think we're done with today's stream. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kimberly. We appreciate you.